Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another book review from the Goosebumps Series 2000 book series. And it's book number 16, The Mummy Walks. Now, I can remember reading this book at least one time as a kid, and when I read it, I think I had just finished watching the first two Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser, and I remember this book being kind of just lackluster, because I remember thinking that there's really no mummy in the book. And after rereading it as an adult, I kind of feel the same way, but I'm genuinely impressed by the things this book did and the chances Scholastic and Stein made with this. This is one of those books that you hear commonly, associated with Series 2000, and the series as a whole is known for kind of pushing Goosebumps to a different level. It's more darker. The situations are more surreal, kind of more violent. The things done in this book, let me just say this. You will not see done in modern Goosebumps. Maybe something similar in some Horrorland, early Horrorland, but nothing in Slappy World or any of that. I don't think Scholastic would touch this concept for a story with a 10-foot pole these days. But I tip my hat to Stein for coming back to the Mummy formula. At this point, I think he had done a couple of Mummy stories. I think there was Don't Wake Mummy. He did The Mummy with My Face. And then, of course, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Return of the Mummy. So coming back, for a fifth time, and kind of making something I guess more simple to follow, more action-packed, with a solid pace to it. I can appreciate a lot about this book. Now, it does have its negatives, and I'll get into that near the end of the video, but if you haven't tried The Mummy Walks, I think majority of you out there will enjoy this book in some capacity. I definitely recommend that you go online, or maybe go book hunting, maybe get lucky and come across a copy, and try this out. I would dare say that this might actually be a good, second or third book if you're a new reader, and let's say you just read your first book ever. This might be a fun little change up for you to try early on, and I think you'll get a grasp of some of these Series 2000 books and what they were doing. This is a memorable one, but not quite all the way, and we'll get to that near the end as well. But let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So, the story starts off with this kid named Michael. And Michael is this, preteen kid. He lives in New York, and he's heading to the airport where his parents are going to send him to Orlando by himself. And he's supposed to go to, Disney World or something like that, and he's really excited. But his parents are acting very strange. His father, who he's normally, really close to, making jokes with, doesn't seem to be talkative, and he's kind of standoffish. And his mom seems to be upset, kind of teary-eyed. And he can't put two and two together why his parents are so upset that, he's leaving them for a certain amount of time. But he gets to his terminal where he's supposed to go. His parents drop him off. They give him a hug. Everything seems kind of somber, and he doesn't know why. And he gets a note, and he's instructed not to open the note until it's time. Well, he heads towards the plane, and he says bye to his parents. And when he gets on the plane, he gets a note that says, "We're not your parents." And while on the plane, Michael's trying to decipher what this means, and he thinks it over, reads it over a couple times. "We're not your parents. What does this mean?" And he can't really fathom this news, and he thinks it might be an elaborate prank. He tries to do something on the plane that doesn't seem to work, so he's forced to sit on the airplane ride. Now, on the airplane ride, he thinks he's going from New York to Orlando, Florida, and he's going across a vast ocean. He looks down from he has a seat in the airplane where he can look out of a porthole kind of thing. And he sees ocean down below and nothing else, and he thinks that he might be on the wrong plane. Maybe his parents sent him on the wrong plane or something. Well, he ends up landing in an airport, And it's in a foreign language, and he gets greeted like he is a prince of this place that he's arrived in called Jezekiah. And he, off the bat, meets up with this general guy, and this general greets him like, "Hey, Your Excellency, Prince of Jezekiah," and kind of going into a little bit with Michael about Michael's true origins. Hey, you're the true heir to the throne of Jezekiah. You're finally here to help us solve this mystery so we can gain order in Jezekiah and be a great nation once again. And Michael's like, "Hey, I think you got the wrong kid. I'm not this kid. I'm from America." And throughout this middle portion of the book, Michael slowly starts to learn things about his past. And he gets confirmation that his parents that housed him in America aren't his real parents. His real parents died as rulers of Jezekiah. And when he was a kid, or a little baby, his parents that he, grew up with, that raised him, took him to America and like hid him there for safekeeping. But there's something hidden inside of Michael that the general needs to be able to acquire this national treasure of Jezekiah, which is this mummy called Pukra. And Pukra was I guess, the founder of the Jezekiah nation. And his mummy has this gem inside of him that has tremendous power. However, there's some side effects to Pukra. And Pukra will animate and come to life if somebody not worthy of ruling tries to come and take his stone away from him, or as we go along in the story, there's some other superstitious things about his character. But essentially, Michael learns that supposedly he has a memory chip in his brain, and the general takes him to this station and tells him to look at some maps and tries to jog his memory about the chip. And he's basically grilling Michael about where the location of Pukra the mummy is. And Michael's like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." He's like, "I think you got the wrong kid. I don't think I have a memory chip." And the general's like, okay, giving him a few chances to come clean. And he's basically can't offer anything. So the general orders him to undergo operation to have this memory chip removed if he can't remember. So Michael is freaked out. He meets this little girl named Megan, who is the general's daughter. Well, I would say daughter. I think her backstory is there's something like she lost her real parents and the general took her as his own kid. And she's not really loyal to him. At least that's how she comes across to Michael. And Megan tries, to say, "Hey, Michael, I'm sorry this is happening to you. My dad's kind of a jerk." And Michael's like, "He's going to cut me open." And he's freaking out, right? And the stakes start to get kind of high. And they essentially take him to this location to try to jog his memory, because they realize they can't get anything out of him. So they take him to this cave, right? And he's not getting anything. And since he's still not hitting on it, the general's like, "Okay, now we're going to go through with the operation." And before he can do so, Michael comes up with a last-minute solution and says, wait, I remember where it is. Let me show you. So he goes to the map, and he picks a random place on the map and says, "That's where Pukra is," right? And the general's kind of like, "Okay, well, we'll see if it's true." And they take Michael, and they pack up, and they get ready to go. Well, I haven't mentioned some stuff that's been going on here, but while they were in the cave, they encounter some hostile rebels, right? And there's some gunfire exchanged and stuff, which is really wild. But you get the sense that this general's been going to many different known caves on this map, because supposedly Michael's not real parents hid the mummy in a cave before they came to America with him. And these rebels supposedly are also after Pukra the mummy. And it's said that whoever possesses Pukra the mummy is the true ruler of Jezekiah, right? So the general is just, I guess, trying to obtain it so they can keep power and not lose it to these rebels. who are, threatening them politically. Well, as they're going out and venturing out to this random place that Michael picked out, Michael's freaking out. He's like, oh, they're going to catch on to me. They're going to know that I'm full of crap. I'm going to get killed. They're going to they're going to do something to me when they find out I lied to them. And Megan, the girl, seems to be, feeling for him and wants to help but doesn't know how to help him. And there's nothing she really can do for him. Well, when they get to this location where this cave is that he picked out, they have this altercation with more rebels. And there's a whole scene here, I kid you not, where there's automatic assault rifles being shot from Jessicaans and rebel Jessicaans towards each other, and people are getting shot, people are falling down. The kids, Megan and Michael, are witnessing this happen. It is graphic, kind of. Not really bloody, but it's very violent, right? And the general is depicted grabbing an assault rifle from the Jeep and like shooting at rebels. It's really bizarre to see this done in a Goosebumps book, but it's fun. It's fun in a lot of ways as well. But they scare off the rebels, and they have this temporary victory, and they want to purify themselves before they get prepared to go into the cave where they think Pukra is. Well, that night of purification, Michael's thinking in his head, he's like, okay, well, I bought myself some more time. At least I don't have to get, killed until tomorrow. And he's pretty much come to grips that he's going to get killed and die, and he has to come to some type of, I guess, conclusion with that. And that's kind of deep to think about with this, with this situation. And it's something you don't really see often done in Goosebumps, where a character thinks he has a death sentence or something. It's kind of deep, right? Well, the next morning, they go right out to the cave, and Michael's like, all right, today's my day. I'm about to meet my maker. It's all over from here. Well, they get into the cave, and off the bat, one of the lieutenants spot this thing that he said would be included in the cave when he made up his story. He said there's going to be a wall of stones, and behind the stones is where Pukra would be. Well, inside the cave there is a wall of stones. So the, people decide to go over and start taking the stones out, and when they take the stones out, they find a mummy in there, and they think it's Pukra. And they're all really excited. They're, congratulating Michael for helping this discovery. But Pukra comes to life. And they think that it's the curse of Pukra. And Pukra's upset about something. Maybe they didn't do the purification process, which is part of the superstition, right? Maybe they have the wrong kid. Maybe Michael's not the kid that that's supposed to keep Pukra at bay, right? So a lot of thoughts are going through everybody's head in this moment. And Pukra starts coming after the soldiers, and they all scatter and run off. Well, this is where we get into very spoiler territory, so I'm going to keep it vague from here. Well, there's a revelation about who Pukra is, or who may be potentially posing as Pukra. And there's this whole thing involving that. And then Michael gets himself in a situation with Megan, where they get captured by the rebels, who they last saw the day before. And the rebels have their own general, and they want to examine Michael just to make sure that he doesn't have this chip in his brain, and something may come of that. And after that revelation, there's this whole contemplation on killing Michael when they come to a certain conclusion about his existence. Is he this prince of Jessica or not? And it gets kind of dark until there's a twist. Well, not really a twist, but there's a moment in the story where Megan comes up with an idea, and we don't know what that idea is until the ending. And we finally figure out what comes of Michael and Megan, and the ending kind of involves them ending back up in a place with certain characters from the story that we thought might have been gone, right? Or hinted at to be gone. And there's a revelation about Pukra, where Pukra's been this whole time. And there's also another revelation about another character, about their motives and all that. And the story kind of ends on a weird note. And that's pretty much The Mummy Walks, right? So yeah, The Mummy Walks let me get my positives off the bat. I think the pacing to this book is incredible. I mean, when I say a hit a ground running story, this is exactly that. Pacing's electric. The tension consistently builds throughout the story, all the way up to the final act. It's just tightly wound. The moments in this story where it gets super wild, gets hectic, kind of crazy a little bit with the gunfire and violence. That stuff is genuinely shocking to read. There's some stakes with Michael's character that I really enjoy, about him getting cut open for surgery, just to get a chip out of his brain. And I kind of like this lore build that they did with him being like this prince of this country that has this history to mummification. And they kind of describe it kind of like, they were doing mummification at the same time ancient Egyptians were. And people often associate mummies with Egypt, but Jessica is pretty much just as well known. But Jessica is like this really small country in the Middle East that it's not really big at all. You can get to, I think the book says you can get from one part of the country to the next in one whole day. So I think the setting is kind of intriguing. You're in a war-torn country. This is one of the few times in Goosebumps where there's like, I guess, a political note to it. And it doesn't go deep at all with it. It's just a superficial thing. There's political unrest, there's rebels, and then there's, the nation states, I guess, militia trying to maintain government and rebels trying to take it over. So it's kind of intriguing, on a lot of levels. And it does get kind of deep with some thoughts about what happens to Michael's character, about him coming to grips with his fate a little bit. There's some sort of acceptance there with his character. He's kind of thrown into a situation where he has to accept that he's going to die. There's self-preservation notes there, and it's kind of scary for a kid to be thrown into that very mature theme of a story. It's pretty good in a lot of regards. But if I had any negatives with it, right, I do have a few. And when I originally read this, I was on vacation when I read this, y'all. I was leaning towards an A. I'm just going to be upfront. But marinating on it for a little bit, this book kind of made me think, like, is this an A-tier book? And it made me really regret on giving, like, 3 books in particular. Phantom of the Auditorium, Headless Halloween, Slappy's Nightmare, even Vampire Breath to an extent. Those books, I feel like I enjoy more than this. And I think it has more flaws than I was originally intending. But one of my main flaws about this book, let's get into them, are the characters. All the characters here feel kind of cardboardy, kind of one note. Megan is probably the most intriguing character in the whole book, only because she seems to be the one that has the most emotional maturity. Of course, Michael, he's a fine kid for the situation he's being thrown in. I think this story is more about the situation than actually building characters, building emotions with these characters. I mean, you can definitely feel empathy with them, but you really don't learn anything about Michael other than some presumed origin that he has no idea about himself. So Michael is just one of those characters. I want to say he's superfluous, but I think he's, in terms of main characters of Goosebumps, he's no Alex Hunter, he's no Carly Beth Caldwell, he's no Craig Morgenstern. There's really no monologue with him. It's just constant fear and worry with him. And you don't really know anything about him, and it kind of upsets me. So yeah, Michael, and I think some misplaced things here. I think the story could have spent a little more time characterizing him. That's one of my negatives. The second negative I have, oh boy, is that the story is so great at building tension, right? Despite the, Michael not being that intriguing in terms of like characterization and stuff, until the final act. And I think the final act as a whole here really just takes me out of the book completely. And what I mean by the final act isn't where Michael and Megan get abducted by the rebels. It's the resolution of that takes me out of it. and the whole part where they go, where they end up after that point, because I don't want to spoil it, I thought was like, okay, where's this going to go? You know, they end up here, and then the revelation comes, and you hear some motives behind some characters, why they did what they did, maybe, and it just comes off so redundant to the whole story, because, in a sense, without spoiling, Michael could have just been spared for being sent to Hezekiah the whole time if this information was just known. And it's so bizarre, and I understand why, if they, you know, there are certain characters that were hiding some truth to protect Michael here. I understand why you would hide it, maybe to protect, you know, Michael, maybe to protect Hezekiah as a whole. But if you really cared about him that much, why would you let him go through all of this? It's so bizarre. It feels like it recontextualizes the story to an all-for-nothing story, and it really pisses me off. When I read the final act, I was really upset, y'all. It's just wonky logic. And then the very ending. The twist to the twist. And it involves a certain character. It's so anticlimactic because where the story ends, it kind of leaves it on an ambiguous note. Quite literally and figuratively here. But when you read the ending and you hear a potential motive behind a certain character the whole time, right? And then you read the last sentence, you're like, okay, well, what does this mean? There's really no context to the final sentence of the book. What does this mean? Is Pukra alive? Is Pukra going back to Hezekiah? What's going on? You don't know. And the way it's said, right, throughout this whole book, right, there's this concept about Hezekiah coming alive, and when he comes alive, there's a saying that the mummy walks, Hezekiah walks. When he walks, that's a bad omen. But at the end, there's an accentuation that he is, you know, giving off a bad omen, but there's no context to it. And it just feels kind of out of place, kind of just forced in there. And it takes me out of the story completely at that point. I'm just like, okay, well, we go through this whole book, and, you know, this is not even really a spoiler per se, but, you know, it's a trend in these mummy books where you don't really see much mummy, and this is no different. And I think you see the least mummy, quite literally, out of any of the mummy books. And the ending just really staples that onto the sheet of paper here. It is not... I don't think it really helps the ending there. I don't see why Stein thought that ending was a good thing to tack on. Maybe he was worried about page space. Maybe he wanted the book to be a little longer. Maybe the publisher did. I don't know. But you could have cut that part out and been just fine. And maybe just created something totally different in the last paragraph instead of going off on this tangent for the last 2-3 pages about this revelation that just kind of detracts from the whole book, in my opinion. But it is what it is. And to kind of conjoin with that, I've already said my piece about the lack of mummy in this book. It is a negative for me. You know, for what it is, I think it's a well-paced story. I think it has a lot of tension to it. The gunfire stuff was fun. But the mummy walks, right? You see this cover. You think there's a mummy involved. And it's not really that. You know, it's more like a cat-mouse game type of story. It's more like it's framed more like a thriller where, you know, people are doing things to keep themselves out of a situation. More so than an actual horror book, you know, dealing with mummies. Some people might dig that. I just feel like, in terms of all the other mummy books, at least a mummy comes out of somewhere, right? This is just, I think, mishandled here. I don't know if they were afraid to market this book like a war book, and maybe there's a different mechanism involved instead of a mummy named Pukra, And Scholastic's like, look, we can't make this book, Stein. And Stein's like, well, wait. What if I make this mechanism a mummy with a jewel? Can we make it then? And maybe Scholastic was like, yeah, we can make it now. That's how it feels. Really bizarre that there's that much lack of mummy here. And it kind of bums me out. But I'd still recommend this. I still think this is a good book for what it is. It is above average in terms of prowess, in terms of writing, in terms of tension. It's really out there with some ideas. But I'm just not quite in love with it. Like I thought I was when I came back from vacation and I thought about it and I'm just like, yeah, I've changed my mind a little. But from a 0 to 5-star basis, I think this book deserves a 4 or higher, but I don't think it quite hits that A tier for me at a 4.5 or higher. So it's between a 4 to a 4.4. And I settled on a rating that isn't quite, I'm starting to love it. Like a 4.3 or higher is pretty much where I start to love something. This doesn't quite hit that, but it's very close. So I gave this about a 4.2 out of 5 and gave this a solid B. This is a very good book, has its flaws, but it is definitely one of the better written Goosebumps books out there, and you should check it out. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Mummy Walks. Let me know down in the comment section. Did you love this? Did you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.